Minutes past the hour 8, and it's time for our roundtable discussion. Now, this morning I'm going to talk to a gentleman who is an advocate for affordable housing, and he's also the CEO of it's actually called Engineer Viglu. And that is the one we're going to have a conversation with this morning. But now, Ghana's housing crisis remains a pressing challenge with rising property costs, high rental costs, and a significant housing deficit, making it difficult for many Ghanaians to secure decent accommodation. And as urbanization accelerates, access to affordable housing has become a critical issue, especially for low and middle income earners. And so in today's discussion, we're going to explore the root causes of Ghana's housing crisis, including land acquisition challenges and the high cost of building materials and limited access to affordable financing. We'll also examine the role of government policies, private sector investments, and innovative housing solutions in addressing this crisis. And from my checks, Ghana has a deficit or a shortfall of over 2 million housing units. What that means is that millions of people are either struggling to afford decent accommodation or they are living in crowded conditions, and rent prices keep skyrocketing. Mortgages are out of reach for the average worker, and affordable housing is simply not enough. But we're going to hear what is enough from our guest this morning, who is already seated in studio. His name is Joshua Elikem Amegashi Viglu. He is a civil engineer, is a digital business and management strategist. He's a real estate and investment consultant, and also a plumber. And he is also, most important, an advocate for affordable housing. And this morning he's here for this particular conversation. Engineer Viglu, you're welcome.
Thank you very much, sir.
How are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's an honor to be here. I like the space. This space doesn't seem affordable at all.
It's very affordable. You know, affordable is relative.
Fantastic.
Exactly.
Thank you for the disclaimer.
Yeah, what is affordable to us might not be affordable to you, and vice versa. Now, today we're talking about a very important issue, and I'm very, very passionate about this subject matter. And I want you to also come with your all into this conversation. I believe that before we leave here, there should be some solutions, a way forward for us when it comes to this housing issue in Ghana. Now, when we are trying to put this together, I wrote housing crisis, and my boss actually pointed out and said that, it's not really a crisis. Yes. So we less limited to problem. I know I told you crisis,
Fantastic.
but yes, less limited to problem or challenge. And I believe that will help. Now, let's start from the basics. How serious is Ghana's housing deficit?
Great. I'm glad your boss said it's not a crisis. It's not that bad. If you look at what we have out there in other countries in Africa and in the world, it's not that bad. The research says 1.8 million people. It's not 1.8 million people. It's actually a deficit of 1.8 million housing units. Now, there are maybe 100,000 homes that are not occupied, very high-end houses. And if you look at a household in Ghana, maybe you have an average of 5 people per home. So it means that there are 1.8 times 5 people who are living in a space they don't like. Either they are exposed to weather conditions, extreme weather conditions, they are living under a bridge, they are living in very crowded places, like you said. If they had an opportunity, they would have switched, but they are not happy where they are. They wish they can change their space, but they can't afford what they would love to stay in. That's the challenge. So it means that there is a need for a better place for these people to live, or they don't have the means to live where they desire to live. So we have to meet each other halfway. Now the challenge is they blame the government, that because the government have not provided houses, the government is not able to blame them that it's because you've not positioned yourself to be able to be housed, because maybe 80% of the housing crisis is in Accra. When you go down to my hometown, there are enough rooms for people to stay in.
Right.
You understand? When you go down to the north, up the north, there are enough rooms for people to stay in. So it's an urbanization crisis.
Right.
Okay, so when you come to Accra, everybody wants to be in Accra. We want to earn more. We want to get the opportunities that come in Accra, we feel shortchanged because cost of transportation hits us so hard. Okay, cost of feeding, you cannot make a choice in those ones. You certainly have to eat, you certainly have to pay. Clothing hits us so hard. So the one that we are able to switch back and forth, it's housing. When you earn more money, then you can choose. But if you don't earn much, then you have to live with what you get. That's the challenge. And usually the biggest issue for Ghana is the rent crisis, because you have to save up to pay 2 years in advance. And
this advanced conversation.
Yeah, like I've never actually done that in my life. So it means I'm not having a good house, literally. Like I can't afford my house because I can't raise my rent in 2 years in advance. That's the challenge that we have in Ghana. So it's something we really need to look at, but it's a sophisticated problem as well.
Now, for a country like South Africa, from my checks, in 2015 to 2018, within 3 years, South Africa was able to put together over 580,000 houses.
Okay. Public?
Now, yes, public.
Okay.
Yes. 580,000 housing units. And in Angola also made a significant effort in 2011, between 2011 to 2016, 70,000 houses. Okay. Now, Malaysia, whom we have a lot of similarities with, also did same in their version 2020. They had a program with the private sector. The government had a program with the private sector, and they set out to build, I think, about 800,000 housing units. They ended up exceeding that, 859,480 according to the checks. So they set out to do 800,000, and they were able to do 859,480 houses. Here in Ghana, we have been struggling to even champion some of these things, and we are going to come to that particular part of the conversation. So I just wanted to give you this so that when we are going. What are the main factors contributing to the housing crisis here in Ghana?
Okay, I'm glad.
Sorry, I said crisis. Housing challenges here in Ghana.
Yeah, so I'm glad you put out the statistics before you ask the question. And you can see the difference between a country like Malaysia and South Africa and even Angola. I don't know whether you are deliberate about this. These are three different kinds of economies. Angola is a typical struggling African economy. South Africa is an African economy. Malaysia is the example for good governance and economic liberation and those things. So you can see what is happening. So the issue about housing is that it's an economic issue. It's just something that when you look at the housing, you can use it to detect or describe the economic space of a country. So in Ghana, because we've been in an economic crisis maybe for the past 4 years, our housing space can literally tell us that no, these people are struggling. These people are not in a good space. So housing is one about the economics, the macroeconomics, and then the microeconomy of the people. So we are talking about the citizenry. Okay, so Malaysia, the leadership is fantastic. Ghana, we've had issues with leadership and those things. They've had exchange rate. We've had exchange rate crisis. They've not had exchange rate crisis. Leadership is good. Macroeconomic is good. Loans are affordable. Finance is good. So you can build. Ghana, we've had exchange rate crisis. We were losing value at about 30%. Interest is 30%. When interest is 30% and the currency is losing value at 30%, the money is disappearing at 50%. So every 2 years, the money virtually disappears. So when you start any affordable housing project, it will fail. That's why any affordable housing project the government starts fails. And any affordable housing project private sector starts seems very expensive, or they begin to charge in dollars because the dollar is guarded against inflation. Okay, when you say it's $10,000, it remains $10,000 for quite some time. But when you say it's 10,000 cedis, it's no longer 10,000 cedis next year. Okay, so when you look at Malaysia, because of the macroeconomic in which they are, they can do more, and then the citizens can actually afford it. When you look at South Africa, because of where they find themselves, they also seem to have done something, and then you see that Angola is not able to catch up at all. So that's the issue about housing. So now there's a macroeconomic crisis. which we hope that will be solved by the new government and their passion in doing things that I've seen in Parliament and the like. If they can solve the exchange rate crisis, if they can manage the interest rates, if mortgages can become a little more affordable, we can do a little more, okay? But the second issue would have been the people. When you look at an average Malaysian citizen, what's their minimum, how's that called? What's their minimum income? Okay, what's their saving habit? What's their transportation habits? What's their spending habits?
Right.
Okay, how intentional are they towards getting themselves a better housing solution? Because there was a time that the houses were even built that people could not afford. You get it? So in Ghana, if the houses are built, the crisis we've had, especially the Segalami housing was priced at $50,000. Is that affordable? And we wanted to build 10,000 units. And it took us more than 12 years. And the houses are still not ready. You know what happens in engineering? If it takes you more than 3 years to build anything in engineering, it costs you 2 times more. So in 12 years, Segalami houses are going to cost you 200,000. This is not a corruption issue. This is an engineering crisis. So the politicians will go back and forth blaming each other. But once the house took more than 12 years to build, it's no longer affordable.
Okay.
Then it becomes a loss to the government. So the next government, if they are smart, they will realize that we don't want to enter this thing. We don't want to talk about it. That's why the past government couldn't do much affordable housing. Then they started other projects. They built 1,000, 2,000 units. Those are not significant to the crisis we have.
At all.
You get it? So if you want to talk about affordable housing, especially you and I, maybe if the politicians are not listening to us, we have to see how can we do some level of self-help as a people. What do we have? What do we want? How can we forge our way towards it? Because in the US, mortgage is 20 to 30 years. In Ghana, mortgage is 15 years. You get it? And the average mortgage in Ghana is paid in 7 years because the interest rate is a crisis. So you better pay really fast, okay? So how can we help each other in such an economic space so that in the next 5 to 10 years, we have a house of our own probably, or we have a house that we are proud of? Okay, and that even takes us to the next stage where I can tell you that affordable housing is not when you own it. The moment you begin to own the house, it's a luxury. The moment you own a house, you're a rich person. The average Ghanaian, which is a word I don't really like too much, but today I'm using it, is will never own a house in their lifetime, no matter who becomes president.
Why do you say that?
Then we have to describe the average Ghanaian. The average Ghanaian eats 3 square meals a day, have a wonderful clothes, a wonderful phone, and barely has a car. Because the average person will not own a car in their lifetime. Do you agree on that? It's not a necessity.
Okay.
Owning a house is not a necessity. Shelter is a necessity. Sorry.
Okay, let me sit down. Go get into that.
You get it. So transportation is a necessity, but owning a car is not a necessity.
Right.
So when you talk about affordable housing, the first stage of affordable housing is not when everybody can buy a house. It's when everybody can afford rent. When you go to East Africa, they pay their rent on monthly basis. In East Africa, I've been in Kenya. I've seen it for myself. I was so surprised. And the average Kenyan, when he makes more money, he moves to a bigger room or a better location. And then when he makes less money, he comes down to a less price location or a smaller space. Okay. But when you come to Ghana, the person is broke. He can't afford the rent again. You are recommending that he moves out. He refuses to move out.
Yeah.
You understand? He saves his whole life savings for a year or two. He uses to pay rent for 2 years in advance. What that does is that keeps you broke. So every 2 years, your cycle of savings is being invested into the real estate economy in a way that it doesn't give you returns.
Right.
So you have become a real estate investor who is earning a net negative on his investment.
Okay.
You get it? Whilst in Kenya, you pay monthly. So when you are saving, you can use that money to probably do a business, improve your financial status, and then scale up for a better place. And then eventually can own a house. And that's why you see that their houses are in a better shape, better priced. They do more flats, high-rise apartments. Ghanaians don't like high-rise apartments. They'll tell you they want a space of their own. They want to waste the land, put the house in one corner, have a wonderful funeral. Then you are losing it. You get it? You are no longer investing into your livelihood. You are investing into your life after death. You get it. So there is a whole mindset shift that we need to look at to be able to solve this problem. The politicians have tried. They've made promises. They are going to try some more. But where we are so handicapped that the more they try, they may just get a mantra for election and then keep changing back and forth. But the problem itself doesn't get solved because the net housing has never gone down. So it keeps increasing. So we need to begin to help ourselves.
I see. Well, if you just tuned in, this is Business Breakfast on Z101.9 FM. And this morning, I'm speaking to Engineer Viglu. And we're talking about the housing challenges here in Ghana, how we need to put in place some affordable housing and how we can go about it. And he's made a lot of points. But you can join the conversation on 0544321019, 0544321019. Feel free to drop us a message on WhatsApp, or you can call us on 0303956 0303956 or you can check us on social media. We're live on YouTube and also Facebook. On YouTube, we are Z Multimedia, and Facebook at ZFMGH. And let's get interactive on the platforms. Well, let's get back into the conversation. Now, I know we've gone ahead. We've gone very far into solutions. Yeah, but I wanted us to understand the issues really before we get into the solutions. And so maybe you may have to take your time and explain some of the solutions that you've, and I'll ask him some more questions along those lines when we get there. But now, why is affordable housing still a challenge despite government's intervention in the past?
Because the solution doesn't lie in the hands of government.
Why do you say that?
Government cannot solve the affordable housing crisis we have in Ghana. So government can do some stuff, but I don't think the provision of affordable housing should be done by government. It never works. I've seen it. The best shot at it was done by Kwame Nkrumah when they instituted a lot of housing models, and then they established SNIT, and SNIT started building the SNIT flags and the like. You know that even then the people thought it was too expensive. People fought against it, and people had to eventually buy a bar. What happens is that we are looking for 1.8 million housing units, priced at $50,000. If you do the math, that kind of investment cannot be done by government. It will suck out all the financial resources from the government.
Okay.
You get it?
Yeah.
So they exactly can't. Now, if they try to build 10,000 at a time, it falls into the hands of corruption, political issues. So the political, those kind of issues. So the nepotism one is even the worst. I was trying so hard not to say, but it was said by you, so I'll just explain it for the people who don't understand it. So if they build 1,000 units, the government has more than 1,000 party card holders. So it doesn't get to non-party card holders. You get it? So whatever they do is just an attempt to look good.
But you are alleging.
Nah, you said it.
No, I said, I mean, we're only highlighting some of the challenges, potential challenges.
You get it?
Yeah.
So the government cannot exactly build enough houses to solve the problem. What the government can do is this, and we need to listen carefully. Utilities. So now the infrastructure is being made by the estate developers. We pay for the meters, we pay for the water connection, and sometimes we build the roads by ourselves. If the government can absorb these ones, to save us 10 to 15% on the price. So let's take a house. It's $50,000. And the government has saved us 15%. That's $7,500. So our house is now $42,000. Now the tax in the industry, so the tax on cement, the tax on sand and winning and quarry dust, iron rods, is almost about 20%. So if the government can minimize it, I don't believe in tax waivers because the government certainly needs the tax. But if it can be minimized maybe to 10% instead of 20%, that's another 5,000 saved. So our house is now $38,000. If the government can now look at the CD, the banking rates, and probably make it it's going to be difficult for them to do by themselves. But if they can, and probably encourage Ghanaians to buy local, they made goods, and the inflation rates are minimized. This money, which is probably increasing at a rate of 30%, will now increase at maybe a rate of 10%. Our $38,000 house will now feel 10% cheaper.
Okay.
You get it? So it becomes $35,000. So what we've done, if we continue this, you realize that we can achieve housing at 50% of what it is. We can get to 25%. There are other ways that it can be done. So if they do land banking, the land is 10%. So now we are 35, so we can come down to 30. So at 30%, we are now providing housing at 60% of the cost it would have been provided. We have saved 40%. So land banking, tax, utilities, support, you have saved 40%. When you do that, more people can buy. If more people can buy houses, there will now be more houses to be rented. Because housing is demand-driven. I can tell you for a fact that if nobody is renting a house, the price will come down. But once there is a tenant inside, you cannot argue about how expensive it is. I hope you understand.
Right.
So once there is a shift, when the house becomes 40% cheaper by this means, don't build, just ease up the tax, support the infrastructure, land allocations, make the road, fix the roads. The middle class, the middle income earners, they can now buy houses. And the people who don't have houses can now rent the houses they used to rent at lower prices. You get, because if I was renting for 2,000 cedis and nobody is coming, I'll rent for 1,000 cedis. I need the money. You get it. But if that is not done, the crisis continues. Right. So housing can become 40% cheaper, or it can be priced at 60% if government does this. Then they don't have to build, because anything the government does is 2 times more expensive.
Why do you say that?
Procurement, it takes 5 years for them to do it. I just told you that in engineering, if it takes more than 3 years, the price doubles. So it takes more than 5 years. Government would have changed by that time. Interest rates would have accumulated. They don't pay upfront. They pay a year after. So interest, the contractor needs to finance it. The contractor needs to take a loan to build it. You get it? So when government does it, it's expensive. That's why you realize that in Ghana, actually the truth is that 80% of housing in Ghana is not built by developers. You save money, you buy land in your hometown, you build a room. Yes, you get it. So this, as for the developers, they don't have a problem at all. We get it. So if the government can do this, we can save 40%. So I've heard them speak in parliament. They don't have to come out. They should just stay in parliament and do some of this stuff. You get it. We'll be happy with policies, it. Yes, they should put in place policies. Once they do that, developers will build more houses and Ghanaians will buy them. Mortgages will give small mortgages and people can pay really fast.
Because Edem Agbana, MP for K2 North, right?
Yes.
K2 North or K2 South. Is it K2 North? One of them. I'm not too sure. I think it should be K2 North or K2 South. One of them, anyway. Yes. Now he raised a lot of concerns in Parliament. Last Thursday, and he talked about a lot of things that governments should be doing. Maybe I should just run us through a few of them, just for the sake of my listeners this morning. So he talked about. He actually started by listing the challenges, and he talked about the rent. We're going to talk about rent, the cost of rent, housing deficits, over 2 million units, weak enforcement laws. Saying that there are laws that are even in place that landlords should not charge an advance beyond 6 months. Is that right? Yes. But that is not regulated properly, and they are charging 2 years. Some are even taking 3 years these days. And also unregulated and exploitative rental market. That's how he puts it. Says that there's absence of clear rent control systems. Landlords charge arbitrary rates and all of that, and it is caused by ineffectiveness in the rent control systems, and also limited access to mortgage and uncoordinated government housing policies, and also high cost of building materials, like you mentioned a few minutes ago. And his recommendations were that they should review and enforce the Rent Act, also restructure rent departments into an authority to resource and give necessary support, and also establish national rent assistance scheme, and then support low-income earners with rent advance loan schemes. Also do a massive investment in affordable housing, collaborate with private sector to build affordable housing, introduce rent pricing frameworks, tax incentives for affordable housing to developers to encourage more housing projects, and also I think basically those are the things that he mentioned. And I know you have some issues with them. You've outlined some of them, but we'll come back to that. Now, why are rental prices rising so fast in cities like Accra and Kumasi?
Yes, so let me give some credit to Adam. He's a strong man. I think he's passionate about his people. I think that's the thing about younger people. They've experienced the challenge and they want to help their people.
Yeah.
I really respect him for that. And the comments that he made are very, very interesting things we need to really look at as a people. But rental prices cannot be helped by policies. So I'll tell you. One, the law says that rent should actually be 6 months. I've rented 1 month before. In Ghana, the rent is paid in advance. The person who I've rented for 1 month is owing me 6 months in arrears.
The one that you gave the room out to for a month to be paying monthly.
Yes.
Following the laws of the country.
Yes.
The person is owing you 6 months.
6 months in arrears.
Okay.
So I want to sack him. So that I rent it to someone 6 months in advance. You understand the challenge? That's why the landlord starts.
So it's a problem as a people.
It's a people problem. So the landlord, usually in Accra, hot locations, the house is not finished. Someone wants to rent it.
Yeah.
So they're like, if you can give me 2 years, I can finish it with your money. And then you stay in that for 2 years. That thing is pretty good for the renter when you look at it economically. Because for 2 years, your rent cannot be increased.
Okay.
You've paid it off in advance. You have your peace of mind. But it's bad because you have to raise that money. You understand? So that's the challenge about the 2 years. Now, what it does to the landlord is that he's able to finish it, or if not about finishing it, he doesn't have to stress you on monthly basis.
Okay.
Because Ghanaians have indiscipline. We don't like to pay. So the rent situation actually forces us to discipline ourselves a little bit and raise it every 2 years. So the paying of 2 years rent is not something that the rent control can really change, because it's usually done in the interest of the tenant or in the interest of both parties. And the tenant is not compelled to abide by it.
Okay.
But he's forced by economic spaces because it's the only option available. So that takes us to the next stage. There is scarcity, and there is a law of scarcity, which I'll paraphrase that. Once there is short supply, the price will go up.
Yeah, because demand will rise.
You get it? So rent control cannot force me to rent my house for 1,000 cedis if there is someone offering me 2,000 cedis for it.
Okay. So you think that we should, until we solve that particular problem, we can't even be talking about the enforcement of what is the laws that are in place.
So we have to provide the houses. When the tenant has options, he can move out of the house anytime. But now the tenant doesn't have an option. So usually when you go to rent control, the issues are more of defaulting tenants than defaulting landlords. Landlords don't have a problem at rent control as much as tenants do have. Yeah, if you look at the records. Because the tenant, oh, sorry, I've lost my job. I cannot pay. If you cannot pay, you move out. Because it's a fancy place. You can afford another place for 20% of that price. You get it? So the crisis we have in Accra and Kumasi is not about the greed of landlords. It's about the urbanization of people to Accra and Kumasi, the migration of people to Accra and Kumasi. So one of the things that the government can do, which the previous government nearly did, is when they created the 6 extra regions. But they didn't really do the best of works. What that could have done is this. When you create a region, you create a regional coordinating council, it comes with jobs and all those things. You create a minimum of 2,000 jobs in the regional coordinating council. You decentralize a lot of things. But let me tell you what they did very wrong. They seem to be decentralizing the economy, and then they actually centralize a lot of the transactions.
What do you mean?
Oh, you don't know this? So what they did is that because they created the regions, we thought now we can do a lot of things at the regional capitals. But they moved a lot of things to national capital. So you still have to come to Accra to get a passport. You have to come to Accra to get a Ghana card. These are certainly you can do it at the other places, but everything bounces back to Accra. You need to come to Accra to book a ticket. You need to come to Accra to get paid for a contract. You need to come to Accra to build a toilet at Javi. You don't have to even go to Ho to build a toilet at Javi. It's a municipal thing. It should be done by the assemblyman. So what we need in Ghana is decentralization. That's another thing the government can do. And when you decentralize, people think it's not even just about just job creation. When you decentralize, if I'm at Ziavi and I want to build a toilet, and I take a car 3 hours to Accra, back and forth, to take a check of 30,000 cedis, 6 hours a day, twice in a year, 12 hours, 2 working hours, 2 days lost just to take a check. Check that can be deposited in my account and it reflects here in Ziavi. I just take it with an ATM card. You have to come and sign in person. Are you understanding the loss to the economy? All these things are affecting it. And these ones are not housing conversations. So people think it's not a housing issue, but it's a housing issue. So the contractor is going to now accumulate all those costs of coming and tipping everybody in Accra on the price of the toilet. So you see toilet that can be built for 30,000. They are building it for 60,000 cedis. You understand the issue? So we have to decentralize the economy. If we decentralize the economy, not too many people are coming to Accra. Even the stress on the motorway will come down. The road will last longer. Our shocks will last longer. We'll spend less money on transportation. We can do more. Everybody builds a house. Rent will come down. Only foreigners will have to rent. You understand? So if we don't decentralize the economy, actual decentralization, not the sentimental and ceremonious ones.
Which ones are those?
No, the ceremonious ones was creating the 6 regions.
Okay.
But they were not empowered to function as a region, I believe. If they were functioning as a region, the rent in all those regions should be pairing with the rent in Accra. Business, I should be able to go to OT to go and take a contract or do some business and those things. Since it was created, I've not been attracted in any way. Because even the road there is not good. I don't go to OT region because of the road.
The road.
So I'd rather come to Accra, I'd rather come to Kumasi to look for business. You understand?
I see.
So they have to empower them. You create the roads, you build bungalows for government. Okay. You create economies. You get it. You create a few industries. Then it becomes decentralized. People don't have to come here to come and do business in Accra. Once people are not coming to Accra, the pressure on the housing units in Accra is down. Then the rent can also come down because the demand would have come down. I hope you get me.
Right. Well, 11 after 9, and this is Business Breakfast on Z with me, Nitrebi Hammond. And this morning, I'm talking to Engineer Viglu.
Yes.
Viglu, who is an affordable housing advocate. And we're having a conversation on addressing the housing challenges that we face as a nation. And we're speaking about how serious it is, and we've mentioned a few things about what some other countries are doing. I was going to ask you that how does Ghana's housing crisis or challenges, I keep saying crisis, I don't know why I see it as a crisis,
it's a crisis,
compared to other African countries? I'm going to come to you on that. But that is what we're talking about this morning, and we've made a lot of points. You can join the conversation on WhatsApp on 0544321019, 0544321019, or call us on 030-3956-641, 030-3956-641, or check us on our social media platforms and engage with our posts at ZFMGH on Instagram, Facebook, and X, ZFMGH, and then Z Multimedia on YouTube. Right, let's get back into the conversation. Maybe you may want to, how is it different? Is it the same thing in other African countries? Do they also face the same housing challenges?
Yes, we all have the same challenges eventually, but I spoke about East Africa, where they pay monthly and they live according to their capacity eventually. In Nigeria, it's worse than Ghana their houses are more expensive than Ghanaian houses. The only good thing they have is that they pay rent monthly.
Okay.
And a Nigerian landlord is a no-nonsense person. You can't keep his money for 6 months. So,
but Ghana will do.
Ghana, we are very lenient.
Right.
Ghana, the law is in a way that you can't sack somebody from a house.
Oh, okay.
So the law is already in favor of the tenant. That's the challenge people don't understand. So the tenant is the most comfortable person in the Ghanaian law. Yes. So you can't fight anymore for him. Then the landlords will not rent.
Okay.
You understand? You can't sack somebody from the house. You always give him another 2 months to leave, another 2 months to raise the money and the like. So that's the crisis. Now, when you look at a place like Togo, Togo is a very interesting place to live in the world. They have a military rule. So the average Togolese, no matter how rich he is, he's very humble. He doesn't spend too much. He just lives like a very economically fair life.
Right.
So they live in very simple housing units. Their rent is not too expensive. Their currency is not too expensive. But it's also, housing is a picture of the macroeconomy again, as I would say. Their economy is also very small. Their economy is like a quarter of Ghana's economy. So maybe that's how it's like that. So they don't have like a big housing crisis, or they don't scream about it like we do. Okay. When you look at the Nigerian economy, the economy is also 5 times bigger than us. So you think their crisis is bigger.
It's bigger.
So in the end, it boils back to the economic size. So in Togo, they don't have a housing crisis. As much as they don't have houses, they are comfortable with what they rent. You see the housing units, very old houses with very old fixtures, and they don't seem to complain.
Okay.
You understand? And that's our number one neighbor. So I realized that it's a thing about mindset as well. The expectations in Ghana are ridiculous. Another thing I've seen in Ghana is that you give a house for rent, 2,000 Ghana cedis. The person wants a bathtub. The person wants air conditioning. The person wants a house to be in a cantonment and all those things. Then the budget, you listen to the budget and I'm like, I sure can't help you. Like, thank God I don't have. And even if I have, I just tell them I don't, because it's going to create more problem for me to find me a house than not to earn.
Okay.
You understand? So in Ghana, you have an expectation crisis. And I've seen videos. People are like, our houses are too expensive. It doesn't even have a jacuzzi. It doesn't even have a security cameras and all those. And all those things are cost. Okay. And once those things are put in, they ask for a house with swimming pool. And you know the cost of maintaining a swimming pool is 1,000 cedis a month. Yeah. So you can't rent a house with swimming pool for less than 1,000 cedis in anywhere in the world.
Right.
But people don't understand. They want a house with swimming pool for 500 cedis. You get it. So there is another expectation issue that we need to really look at. If you ask for it, you have to pay for it. Once there are ACs in the house, it's going to cost an extra 1,000 Ghana cedis. Once there's a security man, he needs a salary. He needs all those things. It costs you another 1,000 cedis. Sometimes cleaning, lawn maintenance. Some people don't want to clean their common areas. If you walk around, you see the gutters in front of people's house. They don't want to clean it. They want the municipal assembly to come and clean it. But they don't want to pay, what's the name of? Property rate. So you're not paying property rate. And you're complaining that the assemblies are not cleaning your gutters. You get it? So we have an expectation crisis. Once we are not paying for those things, they live with us. Then we fall sick. Then we spend the balance in the hospitals. And then the crisis continues.
Right. Okay. Let's move on. Because of time, we have to be moving a bit faster so that we can cover a lot of things. Yes. Now, one of the major challenges is mortgage.
Yes.
And also financing.
Yes.
Now, how affordable are mortgage options in Ghana?
They are not affordable. Mortgage is the biggest crisis in Ghana currently. Finance. That's why I keep on telling you that it's a macroeconomic issue. The unfortunate issue is that it cannot be solved by the banks. It cannot be solved, by the government.
You said it can't be solved by government earlier.
Yes, it cannot be solved by the banks.
It can't be solved by the banks. Okay, let me rule that also out.
Yes.
Now continue.
So let me tell you who can solve it. Jesus Christ. So it can only be solved by the people. So what
by which people?
The Ghanaian citizens.
The Ghanaian citizens.
Yes.
Okay.
So this became an economic issue while I was trying to sell house. So I tried to sell 2-bedroom houses for $30,000, $35,000. That's when I really had to go back and read about economics and finance. So if you followed me, you realize that initially I was talking about housing. Now I've started talking about economics. And finance because I realized that it's an economic issue. Okay. You remember I told you that the mortgage is 30% and the inflation is 30%. That makes the money 60% expensive. Okay. So how can we reduce the inflation to 10% and the mortgage to 10%? The mortgage is +5 of Ghana, Bank of Ghana banking rate. So the Bank of Ghana banking rate is 25. What affects the Bank of Ghana daily rate, okay, business rate and the like? It's a function of exchange rate inflation. Exchange rate inflation is different from commodity price inflation. Though it is usually, commodity price is usually affected by exchange rate. So you are Ghanaian, you're sitting in front of me. I hope I can sample you.
Go ahead.
Your suit is not made in Ghana. So for every suit that you buy, the cedi loses value. This headphone is not made in Ghana. So for every headphone that we buy, the cedi loses value. What did you eat for breakfast? Rice or oats? For every rice or oats that you eat, the cedi loses value. So the cedi is losing value. It used to lose value at 10 to 15%. Before we had the economic crisis, it lost value at 30%. So once that is happening, mortgages cannot be less than 30%. So we blame the mortgage bank. But the problem is that we are eating too much rice. We buy an iPhone every year. We change our cars every year. You can afford it, but the economy cannot afford it. So it boils back, it turns around. And Nigerian politicians once said it. Though you can buy a G-Wagon every year, it doesn't mean that the Nigerian economy can give you a G-Wagon every year. Because for every G-Wagon that you buy, the Nigerian economy loses a little bit of forex.
Okay.
You get it? Yeah. Instead of buying Kantaka, who is as guilty as we are, it's assembled in Ghana, but all the parts are imported.
Let's not go there.
you understand? Yeah. So that's the challenge we have. If we cannot help the exchange rate to get better by supporting Ghanaian economies, all the big companies in Ghana, their managers are, general managers are Filipinos, Chinese. They are imported. That one is also not, it's not an employer's problem. It's a Ghanaian problem. When you make a Ghanaian the general manager, the company collapse tomorrow. So they'll go and bring the Filipinos. So when you bring a Filipino, you pay him $2,000 a month. At the end of the year, he takes the money back to his hometown. You understand? So the economy is too import dependent that our exchange rate is always losing value, and our indigenous commodities are always under high inflation to cope. So you see, Kube, it used to be 2 cedis. The next minute, 3 cedis. For now, it's 5 cedis.
7 cedis.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I mean, I've stopped taking the 7 cedis one. I just take it to my hometown. It's 5 cedis in my hometown.
In Accra, 7 cedis.
You understand? Yeah. So there is heavy inflation. So mortgage will always be expensive. And then we hit at the mortgage bank. They cannot help us. Unless we as a citizenry begin to lean more towards made in Ghana goods. When Ghanaians become rich, they want to buy everything foreign.
Right.
The moment we do that, the economy will never strive. Look at Malaysia. If you study the history, when they started the revolution, they started eat Malaysian food. They started trying to promote local economy. You understand? The next thing we can do is probably things like tourism, where we begin to attract people to this country. It's because I'm in the radio, that's why I'm saying this. If you give a Ghanaian the opportunity to speak about his country to an American, you will see what they will say. By the time you are done, you are sure they want to get a visa by the end of the conversation. So they say everything bad about their country so that they can leave. So all our good resources are leaving. And they are not even able to remit monies that they have made back. If you've tried remittance, you see that is also very, very difficult. Remittance is actually one of the key holders of this economy. I don't know why the politicians never talk about it. Remittance does more good to the Ghanaian economy than cocoa export.
Are you sure?
I'm telling you, go and check.
What are the stats? Check where?
We will have to look at it. I don't have the stats of mine. But if you see the volume of remittance, the African economy actually strives more on remittance than anything else. It was in excess of $6 billion The last time I checked, we already, go and check how good remittance is helping African economies. So that's why when you look at it, sometimes the government is now thinking of how they can promote nurses going abroad to work and remit money back and those things. Yeah, in my business, sad is me that is going to say this, but they say it a lot. They are like, we price as if we are not selling to Ghanaians, we are selling to Americans. How are we selling dollars? But it's true. The kind of products that we sell and the price range is which it is Ghanaians working abroad that and that kind of price, that kind of money. You get it. So they can afford the mortgage. Their mortgage is 12%, 3%. It's 3% on the dollar abroad. It's 12% on the dollar in Ghana. You understand?
Yeah.
And then there was a time the government tried to do 15% on the CD. The model never worked. Anytime the government tries, it never works because it's not feasible. It's not economically sustainable. Yeah, so it can never be done unless we begin to eat Ghana, live Ghana, promote Ghana.
So is that really the reason why mortgage financing is not widely used in Ghana?
Yes. So the only people who use mortgage financing in Ghana is businessmen who can actually raise the money sooner than they need to.
Yeah. So how do we make it more accessible? How do we make mortgage more accessible?
No, we can't exactly help it. If the daily banking rate by Bank of Ghana doesn't come down, if the inflation doesn't come down, mortgages cannot become any better.
I see. Well, let's move on now. For young professionals and young graduates,
yes,
how can they finance home ownership? Or you want to tell them that they should stick to shelter and not home ownership?
No home ownership. Okay, I think I'm a young Ghanaian, right?
Yeah, you too. You qualify.
Yes. So this is what I think we should do. Can I really say it on air? So, a young Ghanaian, how much do we earn a month? 3,000 Ghana cedis.
Yeah, roughly 3,000.
Yes, and then how often do we change our phones?
Well, it differs from people to people.
Some people change their phone every year.
Averagely, yeah.
So maybe we should change our phone every 3 years. That way we can save. Okay. Maybe we should drive a moderate car. So you drive a Yaris, Toyota 1.5, 1.8 engine. That way we can save. Maybe we shouldn't stay too far from our workplace. One of the crises in Ghana is that because we are looking for affordable houses,
you work in
Ozu. That's the worst thing you can do to yourself. Is the biggest financial crisis a young person can have. I'll do the math for you. If you live at Ebri, your rent is 500 cedis a month or even 1,000 cedis a month, and you drive to Osu every day, you spend 100 cedis in traffic every day. You would spend 3,000 cedis in traffic in a month.
Repeat that.
If you live at Ebri, because you want to pay 1,000 cedis a month for rent, and you come to Accra every day of the month, you drive to Osu every day and back, you spend an hour in traffic and back. You will spend 3,000 cedis on fuel in a month.
I agree. But the only thing is that, when we are paying small, we don't see it.
That's the solution to affordable housing on the other side. So affordable housing is when you are paying rent small, or when you are paying mortgage small. It's not when you actually buy the house cash and carry.
Okay.
But now we are looking at, so we are ready to pay small on the things that we can actually save money on. And not willing to pay small on the thing that we really need to own. So it's a financial decision of choosing. You have to choose your little foxes, literally. Like, you have to choose your vices.
Right.
So you have to be deliberate about what spends your money or what burns your cash. You have to make sure that what is burning your cash is assets.
Okay.
Or is bringing you money. And liabilities don't burn your cash. So that's the conversation I'm coming to. For young adults between the ages of 25 and 35, you have to cut down your liabilities and increase your assets. One of them is, if possible, especially if you work in Accra, stay as close as possible to your workplace. Pay 2 times more to stay close to your workplace. This is business for me. That means you rent my house. But it does you more good. If you check, the very highly efficient and wealthy people, they have policies. Those days, radio used to have a policy. You have to stay 15 minutes from your office.
Right.
You get it? So if you stay very close to your house, you would spend a little more on rent, but you save money on transportation.
Okay. That's true.
You get it. You use a moderate vehicle, then you can begin to lean more towards ride sharing. So you have a work colleague, you guys stay together. If you are not married, you should stay with guys, your friends. For me, before I got married, I'd always had roommates. Like for 5 years, I've had 5 different roommates. Yes, you get it. Before I got married.
So you can cut costs.
Yeah. Okay. So either them or me didn't have to pay rent at some point, or we were paying half rent. Okay. You get it. Then spending on electronics. You don't have to change your phone every day. You don't have to change your TV. You don't have to buy the best of fridges, a very big fridge. No. Because all those things eat up your cash flow. Once you deprive yourself, so this is more like late gratification. This is like an economics class. Yeah, but housing is an economic issue.
Yeah.
So if you deprive yourself of those things, you now have more money to worst case study a master's and get a pay rise and become a manager and get a bungalow and a vehicle. Worst case. That's the worst you should do as a fresh graduate. Go back, get a master's, do some professional courses, get promoted, get a vehicle and a bungalow. Worst case. Better scenario. If you do that and you save money, you can start a business. Or you can invest into other businesses. You understand? Now, let me tell you a few more other things. Every weekend we go for a wedding or a funeral. Especially if you drive and you go for a funeral outside of Accra, you'd have spent 800 Ghana cedis driving back and forth. When anybody dies that you don't know the person who is dead, send it 200 cedis. You save 600 cedis. If you do that for 30 days, that's half of the year, half of the weekends. How much would you have saved? You would have saved at least 3,000.
But the issue is that what you are earning at the end of the month is not even enough. How do you do this?
But we still go for funerals. They take quick loan and go. Why are you pretending like we don't have quick loan? I've lived on quick loan. You understand?
Yeah.
You can't. You see, the issue about spending is that sometimes we say you can't spend any less. But I can tell you a lot of things that Ghanaians spend money on that we could actually save money on. The average Ghanaian goes for a wedding every month and a funeral every month. And I'm telling you that you can have the cost of weddings and funerals. And I've not even started going extreme. If I want to go extreme, there are a lot of other things that I can say. For example, if you spend 2 hours in traffic to work and back, and you minimize to 50 minutes, you have 1 hour, 30 minutes to study or to run a business or to do a second job. If you don't go for weddings on weekends, you have a weekend to study and get your master's degree or to do another job. The pallbearers who went very viral during COVID, you know how much they make? They were making 500 cedis each on weekends, Saturdays. And I thought it was just Saturdays before I realized that in Accra, people bury on weekdays. And then weekends, they go to other towns. So they make 1,000 cedis a week. 4,000 Ghana cedis. How many graduates make that?
I know if we want to talk about some of these things, we'll spend a lot of time.
So we have to save money. We say that 3,000 Ghana cedis is not enough. I've showed you how to halve your rent, staying with friends, how to minimize your cost of electronics usage, even credit. The average Ghanaian spends 10 cedis per gigabyte MTN. They buy it every day. So they spend 300 cedis a month to get 30 gigabytes. You know that with 350 Ghana cedis, you can get 95 gigabytes, 3 times more.
The thing is about taking out money in bulk to purchase, but that is the best.
That's the best.
Than buying in bits.
In bits.
Well, 28 to go before the top of the hour, and this is Business Breakfast on Z101.9 FM. It's been an interesting conversation so far. I've been talking to Engineer Viglu, and we're talking about the housing challenges that we face as Ghanaians, and he's giving some very good insights as to how you can live efficiently as a young professional or a fresh graduate, so that you can own a home. Yeah, I'm a guy, so pardon me. Right, so I want us to go into talk about renting and owning a home.
Yes.
All right. Which one do you agree? Is it better to rent or buy a home in Ghana's current economy?
Literally, it's better to buy. but can you afford to buy?
Mm.
Yes. So it's better to own a home in anywhere in the world. It's better to own a home. But owning a home is a luxury because you might not be able to afford it, as I said. And then the next issue that happens is that people begin to try to do it anyway. So they buy very cheap land outskirts of town, build very big houses that takes them forever to build. And by the time they're done building, they can't stay there because it's too far from town. So they don't make good decisions when they try that. So fresh graduates, if you've not had 10 to 20 years of experience working, you have to rent.
Okay.
Rent a modest place, not too far from town. Don't go and rent a very nice house far from town. Rent a modest place closer to your workplace. Then you begin to save money. You earn more money by getting promoted at work and those stuff, or you start a business, you make money, you invest. One of those three things. Get promoted, start a business, or invest in another business. You make money. Now, every money that you make, you begin to invest it into owning a house now. Okay. So you go to any of the real estate developers, they have a 3-year plan. Say, okay, the land is just $20,000, $30,000. It's a lot of money. You pay for it anyway. Then you start building. Okay, in the next 5 years, you would have owned the home. Then you can move in there. If not, to buy an apartment. There's another problem in Ghana. We don't like apartments. And I tell people that if you buy an apartment in your 20s or 30s, by the time you are 60, you have a lot of houses. But if you decide to build your dream home in your 20s and 30s, you may not finish by the time you retire. You get the logic?
Yeah.
So if you get a chance, an apartment is still going $50,000. You don't have to prove anything to anybody by buying a $500,000 house.
And I think that's one of the challenges.
Yes.
Many people want to do their dream, build their dream home, own their dream home, and all of that.
Yes.
But I was listening to somebody who was saying that instead of doing 2 bedroom, 3 bedrooms at a go, you could actually start from 1 bedroom.
Yes.
And then as your income increases, or you begin to get some more money, you can expand, then get to 2, 3, and then you keep going to how many you want to. Exactly.
And you can scale down anytime you want.
Yeah.
That's the truth. Most of the rich guys that I've met, their first homes was a studio apartment. The average Ghanaian who has a 3-bedroom house never bought a studio apartment. What it means is that it took them more years to get their first home.
Yeah.
And then that meant that they would have been frozen the capital, or they would have idled the capital. You see, when you start talking finance, you realize that when you are even idling the money, it's opportunity cost. You are losing that money. So instead of waiting to become general manager and earn 15,000 Ghana cedis before you own a home, while you are earning 3,000 to 5,000, you could have started making deposits.
Okay.
For a studio apartment, $30,000 to $50,000. When you are done, you are not married, you can stay in it. Girlfriends don't mind staying in studio apartments with you. Brothers don't mind staying in studio apartments with you. Even mothers can visit you in a studio apartment. When you get married, you can marry into a studio apartment. Okay. It's when you start giving birth that you need something bigger. If you make this decision early enough, by the time you start giving birth, you will be able to afford a 1 or 2 bedroom house. Then you move out. You get it.
Right.
Then by the time you have the big family, you want to organize house parties in your 50s, you can afford it. And then when you retire, you realize that you don't need a big house because you will be left alone. Your kids are probably they'll be abroad. If you're able to have a nice house in Ghana in your retirement, your children will not like the country. They'll live abroad. Okay. Then you now begin to tone down into smaller units again. But if you strangle yourself to prove a point, you may never even make the point.
You may never make the point.
Yes.
Right. Okay, we have a few minutes. We have some 13 minutes. 23 minutes to go. So we'll talk about, we'll finish on the rent versus home, and then we'll talk about government and policy intervention. I know you've talked a bit about that. Then we talk a bit also about the private sector coming into this whole conversation. Now, what I want to know is what can be done to control the excessive rent increases? What can be done?
Nothing. The rent price is a function of an unsaid economy that is called ROI. I've been really looking into this, and anytime I see the numbers, I get depressed. I have a business that is not making money for my investors. That's my biggest nightmare. So my investors are not happy. What they are going to do is that they are going to take their money and put it into treasury bills. That makes 25% per annum. When they make 25% per annum in treasury bills, they will rather put the money in treasury bills than invest it into businesses. What it means is that their money pays back in 4 years. Now, what it means is that the worst investment to do is treasury bills. It's the safest. It has the least returns. Okay, it's only in Ghana that it seems that profitable. Abroad, treasury bills would have been 2-3%. So instead of building a house that is very tedious and they'll steal your money, workers and land guards and all those things, people just put their money into treasury bills and earn money. Okay, but if I decide to build a house, I have to make my money back in less than 5 years. If you work out the math, it's not possible.
Yeah.
The only places that you can make that kind of money back is East Legon, cantonments, those places. Once you move out of those places, you realize that owning a house for rental business is no longer lucrative or financially feasible. So all the landlords that I have met wish they can charge a little more on their rent. So you can only talk about rent being too high if you are a tenant. But who is king? The landlord is king. So if we find a way to insist and compel the landlords to not rent at the high prices that they are renting, what we are going to have is a housing crisis.
Okay.
Now we only have affordable housing challenge. But if the landlords are no longer building, if people are no longer investing into real estate, if there are no longer houses to rent, now there will be people with money looking for house to rent, and there will be no houses to be rented. Right. So what we have now is even a better scenario. Now there are at least houses available. People don't have money.
So is that why government is not clamping down on landlords and all of that?
Yes, that's why the conversation ends in parliament. But once you begin to research into the feasibility of the decisions, it cannot be done. That's when you study all the resolutions or revolutions that have happened. You realize that in the end, the people were not happy. It happened in Zimbabwe. Now the people have their money, and then the products are so... You get it?
Right. Okay. We'll just move on. We'll just move on. Yes. So what policies must the government, and I want you to be more specific about these ones and speak directly to government if you can. But what policies must the government introduce to reduce or to address the housing challenges?
Okay. I'll give you the easiest one. They can make the maximum rent advance maybe 3 months. Then they insist that you pay security deposit of 1 month, and the law should be conclusive that under no condition shall a tenant exhaust his security deposit and not vacate the house.
Explain.
So what that is going to do is going to solve two people's problem in one shot. Right now people are charging 1 year, 2 years in advance. That means I have to save 2,000 Ghana cedis for 24 months. That's so much money. I can't even calculate it. That's like 46,000 Ghana cedis. 46,000 Ghana. That's business capital to give to a landlord to be able to stay in my house, a 2-bedroom house. So if the government says that, no, I should pay just 3 months, that will be 6,000 Ghana cedis. So I'm paying just 10% of the money I need to rent. You get it? So if I pay 6,000 Ghana cedis, I pay a security deposit of 1 month, 2,000 Ghana cedis. So when my rent is due, I have to pay another 6,000 Ghana cedis. If I don't pay, I have just 1 month to vacate the house. Under no condition should I remain in the house if I exhaust my security deposit. Because legally, you even have to leave once it's exhausted. Then the security deposit is used to restore the shape of the house. You have to paint it back as it were before it came. You have to fix any issues, the light and all those things, because people like to just damage stuff. Ghanaians, we are terrible. You understand? So the law is written in a way that Now the law actually favors the tenant again, but it doesn't give. It puts a threshold on how much trouble the tenant can give the landlord. Because once you exhaust your place, the landlord needs his money, and it's a 2-bedroom. Move into a 1-bedroom. Move into a single self-contained in case you've lost your job or something, so that the landlord cannot get his money from someone else. Because there's a cash flow issue. Sometimes the landlord also has a loan he used to finish the house he needs to service.
Right.
You get it? So this one, I believe, will favor both parties. And it has to be concluded. If you reduce the maximum tenure of advance payments, compel the tenants to leave when it is due to leave. So that would really, really help. Okay. The other thing they can do is that they can reduce the taxes on mortgage. Do you know that mortgages have tax?
Yeah, I think I don't know, but I think it's about 15. Or
it's not up to 15. It's about 7.5.
Oh, okay.
You get it. It's a service. So if you reduce the tax on mortgages, it makes it a little more affordable. If you reduce the tax on building materials, it makes it more affordable. If you reduce the tax on house purchase, it makes it more because in the end, all these things are passed on to the tenant. That's the thing about finance that people don't understand. Any cost that is incurred during the process of manufacturing or transaction of goods is paid for by the end user.
Consumer. Yeah.
So the end user is feeling the pain. The government said the businesses are making money. It happened when MTN, the telecommunication tax, they introduced the tax because MTN was making profit. My data short. It was so painful.
Right.
That tax really pained me more than accommodation tax because I live more on data than I spend time in my house. You get it? So if they can incentivize the tax or if they can minimize the tax, it will also reduce the cost of that. Okay, so that's the second thing they should do.
Maybe we can add one more.
Yes.
And then we talk about private sector.
The third one they should do, now the challenge is that ECG and Co have been privatized, but what they can do, MTN SIM card. The MTN SIM card used to be applied for and our parents paid 100,000 Ghana CDs, old CDs then. But that money was a lot of money then. Now the SIM card is almost free because once you have the SIM card, you will buy data.
Yeah.
So ECG meters should be given, you just apply and you take it. Once you have the meter, you will pay for the ECG. So there will be a 125% inside the bill so that the person doesn't have to pay upfront for it. Water meter should be given for free. Road networks should be done. MTN router is almost free because you pay 350 cedis for it and you get 350 cedis worth of data when you buy it. You get it? So you are not paying for the router. Okay. So the government and the utilities, they are all provided. Once it is provided, they save 10% of the cost of a house, and if possible, including the infrastructure. Okay. And then the last one, they can do land bankings. They should zone lands. Okay, at very targeted areas. And so if you want to do affordable housing, you can come and take this land, tax waivers. They speak to Grader, who is doing a better job than government in the provision of affordable house, to come in there and then develop houses. That will be way more affordable than what we have now.
Right. Okay, now let's talk about the private sector. You talked about three things, and so I think that should help. But let's talk about private sector. How can the private real estate developers contribute to this housing challenges that we face in Ghana? You're speaking about what government cannot do and all of that. Tell me what private sector can do.
This are my bosses, so I can't really talk again there. Okay. The private sector, they try. They have an issue because one of my bosses once said, when we started, the houses were $30,000. Then the consumer said, we wanted bigger rooms, remove the louver blades, put glass, put AC. So the things they asked for actually made the houses very difficult.
Right.
The other thing we tried to do was we tried to build apartments, and then people didn't like apartments. They didn't want to buy apartments. So it's going to be very difficult for the private sector to help. But thank God we are calling the private sector. I'll tell you what can be done. Businesses, can build or support enclaves for their employees. So MTN, big corporation, they can have 10 houses where their employees pay monthly rent in every region or in every district.
Something subsidized, affordable for them.
I don't do subsidies. Let's just call it affordable. So subsidy someone else is paying, and then it becomes a recipe for corruption.
All right.
Because someone will have a house and still take it and now rent it out to another person. Yeah. So once you start doing subsidy, then you are entering crisis. But it should be just very, very affordable. So because you're an employee, you can pay monthly. You get it, and it's deducted from your salary. You don't even feel the pain. You know, the one that is deducted straight from. You don't even realize it.
But when it comes to you, you have to release it.
Then you have an issue. Right. And once you are sacked, hand over every corporate, including your house. You leave.
And actually, that was what I was talking about during our business brief segment. So we have a segment called Business Brief where we get to share some tips. And I was sharing Dangote Cement. That's what they did for the people in Nigeria. They realized that they were struggling, and then they decided to put in place those structures for the people to, their employees to be able to own certain, have some accommodation and all of that. And that's actually helped them even boost the productivity for their workforce. But continue.
Yes. So my former employers actually, and it works very well. It can even work better when you begin to do the young employees within their first 5 years. You can pay them in rooms.
Yeah.
So they pay way less, very close to the office place, and then you can have a shuttle busing them to the office and back.
So that's if it's far from the office. So
within your first 5 years, your salary is not too good, but you become very rich. I just hope they don't use the money to do other stuff. But by the time you realize you can literally buy, that's why the best jobs in the world is the seaman job. They go to work for 6 months, out of reach for everybody. They don't spend their money. They come back with $60,000. You understand?
Yeah.
For 6 months, you don't spend on food, you don't spend on accommodation, you don't spend on dressing. So those kind of stuff. So corporates should make uniforms for their workers. Like, you don't have to even give them the uniforms, but if there is a structured uniform, always wear blue, always wear white. Your workers don't have to spend on buying dressing.
Right.
You settle them. If you settle them, you don't spend on accommodation. So if you have a job that you have all these things, you have to thank your boss every morning. You have to include him in your prayer topics. You understand?
Right.
So if corporates do this, once you get employed by these companies, you don't have to rent from the traditional landlord. And then it will ease the stress on the demand for the traditional homes. Once the stress comes and the demand goes down, the rent will go down. Other people cannot afford it.
Right.
You get it? So you solve the problem at one end, and then you reap the effect on the other side. So this one can be done by government. Government should tell them that once you employ 100 employees, you should at least house 10 of them.
Okay,
it has happened before. Operation Feed Yourself. So you said Operation House Your Employees. It was, John Rawlings who spoke this when he brought ability to pay. It used to be a policy back in the days. He was doing a good thing because Ghanaians have become over-reliant on their employers. That's the thing about good resolutions. It makes the populace very redundant and overly dependent on external factors to solve their problem. But it can be done. So Operation House 10% of your employees. And it can be done that 5% higher end employees, like the managers, senior managers, and then 5% lower end at least. Where we are maybe talking about, can we mention those professions? The professions that don't need special skills. So a security man, cleaning, and those things. You can learn those jobs in 6 months. The thing about those professions is that when you find yourself there, don't stay there for too long. Quickly gain another skill and leave there, because you cannot become a millionaire being a cleaning employee unless you start up a cleaning company. You get it? So we can do that. Once they do that, affordable housing, we don't even have to build again. They would have been busy building, then they would have been giving contracts to the real estate developers. So MTN would have built 100 houses in Accra and 10 houses in every other region. I would have at least gotten a contract in Oti region.
Right. So you believe that we shouldn't just put all our eggs into one basket, like every government is going to look for some land somewhere and build. Now, State Housing Corporation actually, State Housing Company actually did that. They put in those programs when Kwabena, was it Kwabena? was the
CEO.
the CEO. They tried to put that in place, and maybe just to highlight some of the things that they plan to do. Now, so according to their statistics, 60% of Ghana's urban population would need some form of government intervention to support them in accessing housing, and 35% will not be able to access housing even with government support. And then what they plan to do was to give some secure land banks to people who are interested in building and all of that, and also some infrastructure services for the secured land banks, and also incentives, tax incentives and exemptions, like you mentioned. So those are some of the things. So they were giving lands free to be able to do that. I don't know whether it's going to continue under this new government, but
that's research-based solution, and that thing really worked. I can tell you, I've seen the houses. They were bought. People are staying in, very happy.
Wow.
You will know them. Back in the days, those were the housing workers' estate projects that were done.
Yeah.
Now there is some at Temamoto Way, when you are community 19, opposite community 19, there is a big development there. They are there at Adenta. There's Snit flats there. But beyond the Snit flat, there's the state housing flats. That was done. Even that one, they were not able to finish it. But I think the government just needs to support them a little bit. 10%, 20% of support is something we can afford. Okay,
right.
So they should look at it, empower them, and increase it. So they should make it a regional project, and even in the future, a municipal project. Just 20 units for every municipal assembly, and then you will see the recurring effect it will have on the whole economy.
Right.
Yes.
Right. I would have loved that we talked about community-led housing models and even sustainable building techniques that can make the homes cheaper. You know, we focus on concrete in this part of our world, but if you go to some parts of UK today, concrete houses are no longer the thing. I mean, as of now, right?
Yes.
So I don't know whether there are other sustainable, maybe in 1 minute, say other sustainable ways to get some houses cheaper.
Yes, we tried the concrete wall system. Concrete wall system will save you, I think, 15% on structural costs. But even better than that, it saves you money on cooling. Okay, and it gives you a little bit of soundproofing, soundproof and heat proofing, so you don't spend too much on cooling. And then because of that, you can go high rise. Okay, so you have.
In Ghana here, are there people looking for cooling?
Yes, Ghana is hot.
Okay, right.
Yes, so Ghana is hot. So if you have a technology that inside doesn't get warm too much, you don't have to buy an AC.
Right.
You just open your windows. That would really work. But usually, it was not very welcomed by the populace. The end users didn't like it too much.
Could it be the way it was introduced?
So it means it was going to cost us more to market, which is also a cost of housing. Marketing is 5% of cost of housing. So once you are doing affordable housing, you can't market too aggressively. Let me tell you another cost of paint.
Yeah.
Have you seen the color of classroom blocks? It's usually a yellowish color.
Brown.
Do you know why?
Yeah. No.
Because that color requires less maintenance.
Okay.
That's why a luxury house is painted white. You paint it every 6 months. But school blocks are painted that color. You can paint it every 5 years.
Okay.
So when you are doing affordable housing, you would lean towards those colors.
And people
come to buy, they are like, the house looks like a classroom block. They can't stay here. You want a luxury mansion.
Right. Let's wrap up. Maybe you can just tell us the most practical short-term solution to Ghana's housing challenge.
But why do you want a short-term solution?
We need it because.
Okay, I think you mean that can be done urgently or really soon.
Yeah.
So the one that we need to do, the most practical solution to housing, I think is the one that we recommend. Where even though that was not one that I liked so much, I think if you're talking about the most practical, it's when corporates come in to develop, because corporates have a margin. They can afford it. They have good cash flow. They have good money. They can take the rent much easily. They can sack people much easily. So they fund developers. So now developers get money because funding is making housing 2 times more expensive. The mortgage is 30%. Construction loan is 30%. So the funding is 60%. So if the corporates come in and do it, it eradicates the crisis of funding. Okay, then the developer can build. Once the developer builds, the corporate can take its rent from the staff. Okay, so that one can really see action very soon, and we have like at least more than 1,000 companies. If each of them can employ or house 5 to 10 employees, we can see the result now and now. And once that happens, it's going to ease up the demand on rental housing, and then people can now rent more of these houses. But the next thing that we should, sorry, you asked for one, but I think I should give the second one as well.
Yeah.
The second one is that people should empower themselves. We live in a country where we have been trained and conditioned and programmed to think that salvation comes from Jesus Christ. So it depends on pastors. We are waiting for the next pastor to tell us what to do. And then financial liberation comes from politicians. So the government should do this, the government should make the water free, the government should give us light. So you realize that the human being himself is just waiting, praying and voting for pastors and politicians to bring them the things that they want and need. So when that happens, the person becomes unproductive. He just sits back and he's waiting for his pastor or he's waiting for the politician.
Right.
It burdens the elite community because now they have to provide for themselves and provide for us. Okay, they provide for themselves and provide for us. So we can't get anywhere with that mindset.
Right. Well, thank you very much. I think it's been a very fruitful conversation. This is a conversation that we may have to go and listen again. But thank you very much for coming. I'm grateful.
Thank you very much, sir.
All right. So that's how we wrap up today's show here on the Business Breakfast on Z with me, Nee Trebi Hammond. We've been talking to Engineer Viglu. His maybe I should just say his full name so that those who may